So, like I was saying earlier on, that Gecom press conference is probably over, or probably under 2 hours. So I will only be highlighting the questions and the questions and answer segment, but I can give some text of what was said early on before that press conference with the media. A total of 715 people are registered to vote in GCOM's 2025 elections, but the list could see changes as the Guyana Elections Commission deliberates key issues, including the use of biometrics and the removal of deceased voters. GCOM chairperson Claudette Singh underscored the current laws restrict the removal of individuals from the voters list based solely on their absence from the country or relocation within Guyana. Speaking on Friday, she reiterated that GCOM can't act beyond the statutory authority, citing a 2019 court ruling that prevents the removal of names. She said the law is clear that residency is not an additional qualifying requirement for registration as ruled by the Chief Justice, which is Roxanne George. The names currently on the list cannot be removed unless there is proof of death or disqualification, Singh said. The opposition has called for the introduction of electronic fingerprinting ahead of the next elections, but there's been no decision on this proposal. Following an earlier study assessing the feasibility of biometric systems, GCOM's commissioners remain divided on the next steps. I know that division is between the PPP commissioners as well as the PNC commissioners. Some argue that stakeholder consultations must precede discussions on the study, while others believe internal deliberation should come first. Justice Singh, siding with the latter view, emphasized the importance of GCOM fully understanding its capabilities before engaging stakeholders. He said the matter is sensitive, and unless GCOM determines first if it's something it can undertake, then it would appear uninformed and unprepared. Discussion on the issue will resume at the Commissioner's next meeting. Despite these unresolved issues, the Chief Election Officer Vishnu Prasad confirmed that the Secretariat has started preparing for the 2025 polls. While the Commission has not fully mandated us to begin preparations, we are aware of our responsibilities, said Singh. Removing the deceased from the list, one area of focus is ensuring that deceased individuals are flagged in the National Registration of Registrants. Prasad explained that GCOM relies on death records from General Registrar's Office and other agencies to update the list. However, challenges persist. A recent report flagged 1,018 names as deceased, but the Commission has yet to agree on the methodology for verifying such case, including for those who may have died overseas. So this now is the question answer segment of today's GCOM press conference.
Chair, CEO, DCO. We've now come to that point where we are open to responding to questions from you, members of the media. We ask that, as usual, you introduce yourself by stating your name and the media house you represent. We ask that you keep your questions brief so that in the interest of time for all of us that we wrap up this press conference within the designated time. I see first Mr. Chase, Mr. Marks, and sorry sir, I didn't get your name. Right. Okay, so we'll go first with Mr. Chase.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Chase, Nightly News. I hear you on the registration for citizens of Commonwealth countries, and you said resident or domicile.
Not or
and domicile. Is that the practice of GCOM though? Because your advertisements out there, it doesn't say resident or domicile, because I believe the representation of the People's Act, the amendment, states that you must be resident or domicile.
The National Registration Act, not the amendment actually, the original National Registration Act says that you need to be domiciled and resident.
But is that the practice of GCOM?
That would be something for more seasoned members like us.
No, it's you.
Yeah. And second question before you answer. Madam Chair, there's a protest outside of your office every Tuesday.
Yes.
A part of, added to that accusation against you is for you to resign and leave. How do you respond to those accusations? Yes, but I think that's important that you can.
I can't, they have a democratic right to protest.
And calls you to resign?
Well, I don't know about resigning, but I mean to say when I want to resign, I'll resign.
Yes. Thank you for the question. Let me start out by saying, without any reservation, that it was only at the point where this legal officer brought this need for the criteria of being domiciled in Guyana that we started to focus in that direction. Before then, and those of you who may know, going back to since 2001 when I joined Gecom, the practice had always been to apply the criteria of citizens from a Commonwealth country living in Guyana for 1 year or more preceding the qualifying date. Yes, you are correct that the advertisement, the guidance out there that was provided to the general populace, as it turns out now, would have been inaccurate. That will certainly be corrected as we move forward.
Mr. Marks?
Neil, I work with the newsroom. Madam Chair, what questions were you seeking to get answered in your feasibility study regarding biometrics? And what different questions are you now trying to figure out about your capability to do biometrics? And can someone tell me how many days you know on the...
I cannot speak more about biometrics because, as I said before, it's still before the commission.
Yeah, I'm not asking you about it. I'm just
can't.
trying to figure out what were you trying to determine in the first place and what are you now trying to determine? It's a
If-
study that you're seeking to
If
do. and
if
it's
I'm
confusing.
going to tell you that now, I will have to go into it and I cannot go into it. They have not discussed it.
Do these
We
commissioners
have
give
to
you a
first
headache,
discuss
Madam
it.
Chairperson? Do these commissioners give you a headache?
They have not discussed it. It was there for about a week or two, and they did not. They wanted biometrics all the time. They're saying they want it, and they just went around. Right now, one set had said, look, let us put it first to the stakeholders. But we said, no, we must have a position. Let us discuss it here. So that is where we are now. So on the next meeting, which hopefully will be Tuesday, I'm expecting them to discuss the study.
Can I just quickly follow up? Has there ever been let's just say your feasibility determines that you can do this, and now you're trying to figure out, can Gecom do it? Do you have the money to do it, or do you
Well,
foresee that
those
you'll
are
have
questions
problems?
which we have to discuss. And that is why it's important for us to discuss it before we go to stakeholders. We must have a position.
The
Can someone tell me?
Oh, he
Sorry, just
had a
one
second question.
Oh, you had a second question?
So the
What's the
next-
number of people on the register at the moment?
The registered?
I can speak to the official list of electors. I can probably lay over the information as regards to the register. The official list of electors that is current, it's 718,750 electors. 718,715.
Okay. Mr. Garner?
And that is in respect to qualifying date of 30th of June 2024. Obviously, after CNO in January coming, there will be a new official list of electors which will be further updated.
Good afternoon, Wilson Garden for Star News. Can you update us on the offer by the international countries to provide aid for the elections in Guyana? Can you give us an update on that?
We are waiting to come up with feasibility study. So, with specific reference to that question, the Commission did meet with a team of persons who are referred to as the International Development Partners, on which the collective position was that they have agreed to respond to the needs of Gecom based on a feasibility, based on a needs assessment. We have not as yet been formally informed of the arrival and duration of the visit of our needs assessment team. We did write to, as was agreed to by the Commission, to write the international development partners through the UNDP to invite the presence of a needs assessment team. We are optimistic that that team will be here in Guyana to conduct its needs assessment and give us some recommendations before the end of the year.
Can you tell us when you met with the team?
But it was a meeting
Early
with
October.
In October. In October.
And can you possibly brief us on some of the needs that GECOM might have for the
Well, that would be premature. The purpose that these people, these experts are coming is to, in discussion with stakeholders here, political entities, GECOM, the government, to establish those needs.
But for GECOM, can you?
No. Again, that would be premature.
Mr. Mosley and then Mr. Chabral.
Gordon Mosley, Newsource. Mr. Giddings, you mentioned just over 14,000 registration between January and I think the end of October. Am I correct with that?
28,000.
28,000
28,208.
between January and the end of October. Could you have a breakdown of those registrations? How many are Commonwealth citizens, domiciled and resident, as against how many are citizens by naturalization, as against Guyanese by birth?
I think we'll have to follow up with that information. I don't have such a breakdown. I do have it by district and so on, but I don't have that category before me.
But you must have looked at that in terms of using
I
flow.
did, but I wouldn't want to proffer this information here and be, it's going to be inaccurate. I would prefer to give you specific numbers.
In terms of regions and districts, which are the districts you're seeing the most registration taking place?
As you would no doubt guess, district number 4 is the largest, and that is followed by district number 3 and then district number 6. We're looking at numbers that are elevated there. The smallest registration district for us is district number 8.
And Mr. Prasad, you mentioned being provided with information about just over 1,000 deaths from the certificate officer.
No, that's wrong. From the chief medical
From the chief medical officer, sorry,
and the
police
commissioner.
Come back.
Yeah, just over 1,000.
1,080.
For what period?
It did say that the reporting period was January to April 2024. Now, I don't know, I would be misleading you if I told you that the deaths were specifically of deaths that occurred during that period. I don't know if any would have been in late December, for example. So again, the reporting period is for January to April 2024.
And can you say how many reported deaths you have recorded or have been provided with from the last elections to now in total?
It's information that we can put together, but which we don't have with us at this time. Because we do have records of every occurrence of flagging persons, and yes, that information could be put together and forwarded to you.
And I know you mentioned, sir, that the issue of being domiciled was brought to this commission by the current legal officer, Mr. De Silva. Taking that into consideration, how does GECOM treat with persons, because we live in an oil industry where you have persons coming in from all over and working. How does GECOM then treat with those persons who may have been registered or may have been seeking registration but they're not domiciled, and this now being brought to your attention, this advice from your legal officer? How does GECOM treat with those who may already be registered?
Right. So this is how I will answer you, Mr. Mosley. First of all, if you paid keen attention to what the legal officer said, he said, though in the case of being domiciled, it must be with an indication or an intention to live here with some level of permanence, or to live here indefinitely. Now, that in itself does not help us to determine what we would have to develop a methodology to approach this matter as we treat with citizens of a Commonwealth country. And it is only after we arrive at such a position that we would now have to go to the Commission for direction or approval to anything that we may come up with as to whether we go back to address past application and completion of registration transactions for persons in that category.
So having received the advice, have you sort of adjusted the sales for your registration process, dealing specifically with Commonwealth citizens? Have you adjusted that with the advice of your legal officer that they must show that they're going to be notified?
I can tell you what we have done. We have applications in that category on hold until we formulate a methodology that we can use to treat with them to bring those things to satisfactory closure.
And Madam Chairman, just before I go and all of that, how is the Commission addressing this, and how is the Commission being guided by the law and what it says about the treatment of joinder parties? How are you being guided, and why have you been acting much on it?
You mean the last election?
Yeah, the last election, the joinder.
Kurt, you
Well, I don't know what you are referring to in terms of the treatment,
treatment.
or how you treat with
Well, you
them.
have
But
exchanges of letters from who is the actual...
I can say this much. The Representation of the People Act addresses this issue. It says how joint parties are to be treated with. It says how seats are to be allocated to join the lists. And it says how seats are then to be further allocated among the parties that form the joiner.
Can you explain that to us, if you can, in terms of who gets the seat, as in this situation that we have now?
Okay, so according to Section 97, we're a combination of lists. That's what it's called. Where they are awarded seats. Those seats are awarded as if they're one list. But then Section 97(5) says that seats must be further allocated among those parties in the same way, using a different electoral quota. And the different electoral quota is the number of votes that they got. Now, obviously no individual party would have gotten all of those votes. So then it goes to which party has the highest number of votes. And the seats are allocated in that way. So if it's one seat, the party with the most votes gets that seat.
For the duration of the...
For the entire period, yes.
Yes.
So we've seen this musical chairs
Yes.
with these parties. Is that an error on behalf of Gecom? And is Gecom going to seek to have that remedied when there's a row out there among a party in waiting and a party refusing to move?
And just to follow up with
And the LJP, I think, was the party with the most seats,
GSP, right.
the most
Yes.
votes. So how does Gecom fix that, Madam Chairperson, putting on your legal cap?
And Gecom revoked the appointment of
If,
Gecom.
if I may assist, Madam Chair, just from a legal point perspective, it is for the Speaker, where a vacancy has to be filled, it is for the Speaker of the National Assembly to initiate that process by writing to the representative of the list and obtaining their extraction of who is to fill that list. And so when Mr. Schuman demitted, when he resigned, the Speaker did carry out that process. That what followed was, I can't presume to know what was in the minds of those of the persons, but the list that name needed to come from was the LJP list.
But did Gecom bring that to the attention, or attempt to bring it to the attention of the Speaker, that there may have been an error here and this ought to be fixed? Has the Commission discussed this at all?
Gecom is in a position to revoke the certificate of appointment of Dr. Kisu, correct? So why are we doing it? If JLP is supposed to get a seat, her certificate of appointments could be revoked. Make way for the correct party to join the seat.
I can say this, Madam Chair, if I may. This matter, I mean, I know you have questions. I don't think you will get the answers here and now, because this matter is actually on the agenda of the Commission, and I know Madam Chair will not want to proffer any opinion at this point. It would be premature. It is a matter on the agenda.
But
I
legal
know
opinion was proffered to the Commission.
that's correct. And the commission needs to discuss it and decide as a collective as to the way forward. Whether they interact with the Speaker of the National Assembly, or if they need to wait on some correspondence from the National Assembly or otherwise, that is before the commission, and I know it's on the agenda.
You see which meeting it will be coming up at, Madam Chair? You seem to be dodging questions this afternoon.
I'm not dodging any questions.
So why are you shy to answer?
Answer what?
So why are you shy to answer?
Answer what?
So tell us why you aren't addressing this situation.
Can I tell you something? That matter went before the commission and they said nothing. So here's another step I'm thinking of, which I don't want to be divulged here. Here's another step.
But we're facing elections next year.
Yes, but that step would be addressed very shortly from now. A short time from now.
And they can be guaranteed of that.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chagall.
I'm sure you see at this stage, to what extent are you concerned that the police information department have found,
Not getting you clearly, that is.
so yes, to what extent are you concerned, Madam Chair, that the police information department have found out that several persons were not in Guyana on the day of the 2020 elections, as far as that is concerned?
Can I say something to you now about that? And this is the way I treat with that. What the police, what the chief immigration officer has said, that is not evidence. You can say anything. Of course, he gave some names. Now, they had given me, he's the chief immigration officer, and suppose he had given me like 8,000 names or whatever like that. Of course, that would have taken up the number of persons who would have voted. Now, so what should have happened is this. We expect those things to be raised on an election petition. Now, during the election petition, it is, of course, who would have been the witnesses? The very immigration officer who would have admitted those people, and of course, they have to get their ED cards, the entry and departure cards. That's the way you will prove that. And there was no election petition, it went overboard. But that was the forum for those things to be treated. That's how that ought to have been treated.
But administratively, what could you have done?
I can't do anything without seeing the E&D cards. That's not for me, it's for a court of law. The Constitution is clear, 163. That's the way you question an election. If there was an unlawful act committed, and of course that would have been an unlawful act.
So that's the only recourse?
Yes, that's the only course. That's where you could have this was just before the recount. And the recount people, they were all there. And I mentioned that to Mr. Harmon at the convention center.
On another matter, and this is also something that has been repeatedly in the public domain, particularly through Mr. Alexander. Why hasn't there been any internal administrative investigation, if you will, about the missing statutory documents as they allege in the 2020 elections and other documents?
The 47 documents?
Yes.
Oh yes, let me address that. Now the 47 documents, Chief, well, I'm going to ask you what are the documents going to be going there for the Mosley. Now, we would not have known about that until there was the recount. That's the only time when you would have gone into those boxes. So during the recount, Mr. Anil Giddings reported to me that there were these boxes came in from East Coast and there were no documents in them. I told him to hold the tabulation, and I called a meeting of the commissioners because they were all there. And I called the then chief election officer, Mr. Lowenfield. Mr. Lowenfield said he knew where the documents were and he was going to get them. I said, where? He said, in Colvin, they were in a bag. The next morning, Mr. Lowenfield came back and he said he could not find the documents. They were not there. I said, okay. And then the commission went on to discuss it. And Mr. Alexander, I remember, joined and said that he doesn't believe in disenfranchisement. Now, I go back to Esther Pereira. I cannot, those people voted and they left and they went home. Who was responsible for putting those documents in the box and who locked the box? Gecom staff, and they were the person who were responsible.
And if I may, Madam Chair,
Yes.
in recognition of that, I think we would have ensured that we look into our training methodologies to bolster it in that regard. Whether it is at the level of management, returning officers, supernumerary returning officers, and so forth, all the way down to polling day management staff, presiding officers, etc. So this is very much something that we will reinforce processes this time around. About how the box is to be packed and what is to go in and what not.
What does the law say about putting things in the box?
Yeah, so there are very specific things in terms of how sensitive materials should be treated with and so on, and that's what Mr. Giddings is referring to. We are working on the manuals, including myself, to ensure that the training that is done for the upcoming elections actually guides persons to do what is correct and does not leave room for them to do otherwise.
But what I'm asking you, what was your presentation to answer, whether anything should be in the box other than the votes?
Whether anything should be in the box
Other
other
than
than the
votes.
votes.
Yes, there is specific.
Thank you. I see we have one question at the back. We have another here, and we take one final question from Mr. Chase before we wrap up.
Mr. Sorry, you mentioned, pardon my you mentioned steps you're taking without formal instructions from the commission, sort of to prepare for elections. I wanted to know, ideally, how much time would the Secretariat need to properly prepare for a 2025 elections?
I did mention that normally the electoral cycle will cover 6 months.
Okay. Okay. Your question.
Good afternoon, and as Ms. News, I'm not sure that over the past few weeks there have been a lot of talks about having a referendum placed on the ballot at elections. What I would like to know, if a referendum is held before the end of 2024 or maybe in early 2025, would that complicate or interfere with the electoral process, and would it be an expensive venture for Gecom?
We don't have a referendum.
Okay, so there have been talks about a referendum to be held in relation to a number of things like biometric, some renegotiations for the KSA, etc. So I'm asking, a referendum in general, if we were to have one, let's say, in 2024 or early 2025, would that further complicate or interfere with the electoral process, and would it put an added or huge expense on Gecom?
So let me attempt to answer your question this way. First of all, at this time, we are not aware in the slightest way, shape, or form of any indication of there being the need for the conduct of a referendum as something that Gecom should focus on. That's number one. Number two, if there were to be a referendum as a separate activity from that of the conduct of general and regional elections in 2025, there is no time between now and that period within which we can hold it, because obviously the constitutionally due conduct of general elections cannot be interfered with. What is a possibility, as have happened in other jurisdictions, is that the issue on which the referendum is to be held could be included on ballots for the general and regional elections. But laws would have to be changed to make provision for all of that, and I don't see that happening in time to if there is to be a referendum, I must say, in that regard.
Thank you. Since the 2020 elections, how many of the election observers' recommendations have you implemented and has the Commission discussed?
Well, of course, we are now, as you know, only recently a constitutional reform body was formed, so there were no constitutional amendments. So we're waiting on that to do constitution, but we did the laws, the RPA and R.
So true.
If I may, Travis, if I may, sorry, Lord, if I may, most of those recommendations, the implementation of them do not fall within the realm of the Guyana Elections Commission.
Mr. Giddings, I think, if my memory serves me right, and you can help me with it, in 2019 as IT manager, didn't you spearhead a study or compile a report on biometrics and present that to Gecom?
Gordon, you know you have a lot of outside information, or inside information, I should say. I would say this, and I don't want to preempt any discussions at the level of the Commission. And yes, there was a document or a discussion at the level of the Commission with regards to this matter. There was no decision. I don't believe that discussion went on for more than a single meeting. And it was all in an effort to, it is while discussing the budgetary proposals that were presented by the Secretariat to the Commission, there was a particular piece of equipment that the Commission wanted to decide on whether it should be included in the budget or not. And that was where that stemmed from.
And your report also gave a timeline. If we were to move to biometrics, this would be the period we would need to prepare for that.
Well, no, a timeline was not proffered.
18 to 24 months?
A timeline was not proffered in that regard.
Madam Chairperson, you're aware of this report?
No, that would have been before my time.
So all those biometrics talks, you're not asking as if we do what?
Well, nobody mentioned that.
So now that you know.
I understand there was a scanner. They asked about the scanner. That's all, but I do nothing but biometrics then.
Look, as part of my duties as IT manager, I was required to inform and advise the Secretariat, to the Chief Election Officer and the Commission about, improvements to the registration process and systems that we may put in place. Currently, we do use biometrics to determine the uniqueness of a person on the register. Notwithstanding that is done in a manual way, the suggestion was to propose to the Commission, not for the implementation of a system to move from manual to digital capture, but to allow the Information Technology Division the adequate resources so that they may test and code and develop some platform and recommend adjustments to the registration process that will see such an introduction. So I don't think we ever arrived at even a discussion about implementation, maybe up until now, where then at that time the IT division was asking for a scanner and some other equipment to go ahead and do their work, or our work at the time, in a manner that would provide a proposal, so to speak, that this is what can be done, and there is where your timelines and so on will come into. So it was all preliminary at that juncture in 2019, 2018, if I recall.
And on another issue, just outside the elections, people dealing with ID cards. I understand there's been sort of an upsurge in applications for replacement of ID cards since the government announced the $100,000.
Yes.
Can you confirm that there's been an upsurge and Gecom has now find itself sort of stretched?
I can say that there has indeed been, in fact, more transactions, more persons flocking our offices. But you see, I don't want to assume what the reason is.
But since announcements, you've seen that.
I've seen that, yes.
All right, Mr. Chase, I think Mr. Marks, and we take those last two questions in wrap up.
I want to clarify something.
Okay.
I just wanted to be clear in my head. Before the next elections, would a house-to-house registration process to would a house-to-house registration process to develop an official list of electors be necessary, futile, whichever word makes the most sense? Would it be necessary, given that you have the police reporting to you, the medical people reporting to you, and you have the national register people?
If I may, Madam Chair. Mr. Marks, we simply do not have the statutory authority to conduct a house-to-house registration. That's the bottom line.
We have continuous registration, not any registration.
So you do verification, right?
House-to-house registration.
Right, but do you do verification, right?
We do verification of addresses.
But why not in person? Why addresses only?
This is what the law requires us to do. Verify addresses.
And you don't see a fault in that?
It is for us to comply with the law, not to question the law.
You're the chief election officer. You don't see a fault in just verifying addresses.
Mr. Travis Chase, my responsibility is to comply with the law.
Yes,
Okay, so Madam Chair is highlighting that this issue has come up, the issue of verification of addresses and all that entails, and it does complicate things in relation to other laws and so on. So a letter has been written to the AG in terms of at least seeking clarification in terms of what was intended, so that the Commission can be informed of how it can proceed.
Thank you.
Yeah, but the Commission.
Travis, one of the questions that you had asked, I want to make some additional comments on a point of clarity. We touched on the issue of citizens from Commonwealth countries being domiciled in Guyana, and I went on to talk about methodology. And as we proceed, I recall that the legal officer did prepare an opinion on this matter that was submitted to the Commission. The Commission engaged in discussions in this matter, but not to a point of closure. So this is still a live matter before the Commission.
Just have a small question. Will Gecom be handing over any sort of data to the government concerning to assist them in processing the $100,000 grants?
The answer is no.
Why?
Because we do not share data. The only data that we share is data that we would publish on the preliminary and official list of electors. What we have shared and will continue to share is a search tool that allows for the verification of persons listed in an OLE, as in this case, the OLE with the qualifying date of June 30th. It is not about the provision of data to any external agency. It's about giving a search tool which could allow them to verify, for example, if the ID card issued to Mr. Dennis Chabral actually relates to Mr. Dennis Chabral. So by typing in your ID number, it will throw up the information of Mr. Dennis Chabral.
What really were they asking for? Anything beyond that?
They asked for an approach to assist them in verification of ID numbers. That is what we gave.
The ID numbers are published online with the voters list.
Yes.
Right? And there's a concern by some persons because I think someone realized the other day that folks were using random ID cards, ID numbers to apply for government to be on the courses and stuff like that from overseas. Just putting their name, but 116925 based on what they're seeing on the list. Is that a concern that this information is out there where anybody can go to the website and just pull up and get the ID card number and the addresses of people?
We
online.
I would even go beyond online. We are required, when we go to conduct claims and objections, to post the preliminary list of electors. In the case of the official list of electors, to post a revised list of electors across this country. The information published includes the ID numbers. So the issue of this information being online is not as if to say it's not accessible in any other way, shape, or form.
But do you have the authority to publish it online? You just said you act by law, what the law says. Does the law allow you to publish this information online, in a format online, as against at the shop, at the school, at the temple, at the mosque, at the church? Does the law that guides your job at Gecom allow you to upload this information and leave it out there for anyone not even associated with us to get access to the personal ID number of persons?
Our action has been guided by the policy decisions of the Commission, and I'm telling, I joined Gecom in 2001. At that time, and I am aware even before having been employed by Gecom, that the list of electors posted did and continues to carry the ID cards of electors. The Commission must have been guided by its own consideration, and let me also make it clear that the Commission is authorized by law to make decisions within its own consideration that would enable and facilitate efficient conduct of the activities within its statutory authority. And if I were to give an example of that, Order number 60 comes to mind. That was not a law, but the Commission took such a decision to conduct a recount, and it became a legal activity.
But are you aware then of an order, and Mr. De Silva, you can chip in, that allows the posting online of these information from voters? Was there an order, a document, something within Gecom that allows that online?
Okay, so something I was going to say earlier in response to another question, but the Commission publishes an order where it needs to amend legislation. So if it is that the Commission encounters some difficulty in carrying out its duties, and that difficulty extends to a provision in an act, then the Commission has the authority to publish an order which then essentially amends that act. There is nothing that requires the Commission to publish an order where they're not prohibited from or barred from doing something. So in the sense of the national, in relation to the national identification card, I'm informed that that's something that has been done since whenever, but there is nothing prohibiting the Commission from doing so. And more than that, for the purpose of carrying out its duties in relation to claims and objections and so on, one would think that a national ID card, a national ID number would be something that is essential to the process of claims and objections in order for electors to be identified and properly either objected to or claim not to be on. Because a name is, anyone, many persons can carry any name. But in relation to identifying the elector and saying this elector does not need to be here, that is something that, because you would then have to be very specific in terms of who you're objecting to. And so I wouldn't, all I would say is there's nothing that prohibits it, and it does serve a purpose in relation to Gecom carrying out its functions to ensure that the list is.
There must have been something, and that's what I'm trying to get. There must have been something that triggered it. That Gecom woke up one day and said,
you mean
with effect from the 3rd of July, when it's 1997, we will begin posting this, because having covered elections.
You mean posting it online?
Yes, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Having covered elections since 2001, I'm trying to figure out when was the period.
Well, I actually would not be able to say when this originated, when the online publications originated. So that is likely before my time.
Just before 2020, I think 2015.
That'd be before my time. So I don't know when it originated, but I'm just speaking in terms of whether an order was necessary in accordance with the law for that. That is as much as I can.
Could you say how you arrived at this identification number? What does it really represent?
There is an algorithm that generates an identification number. Beyond that, I wouldn't want to say any more because it would be, breaching our security processes. But the ID number is, any ID card now would bear a 9-digit ID number. But as much as I don't know if I answered your question.
What does it represent for Gecom?
It represents a unique identifier for those persons registered. As the LO just mentioned, in the process of claims and objections, in order for me to object to someone, I need to supply their ID number. That ID number is pulled or recorded from the list that is either posted online or hung up in a building across the region.
Thank you.
Good.
All right, colleagues, thank you very much. I know we went